Hey, what's up guys? It's Alex Espinoza with the Ricky Henderson of YouTube. Make sure to use the code RickyBlog at lastivar.com for 10% off your next order. And hello from Mexico. I'm into my new spot, so let's jump into it. I'm going to do just a break. There's been a bunch of A's news going on lately, but I'm just going to do a little breakdown about a couple of weeks ago, the Las Vegas Stadium Authority had a meeting on October 17th, so I'm just going to kind of break that down in depth, and then hopefully later this week I got some more videos kind of breaking down everything else. But all right, let's jump into it. So on October 17th, the Las Vegas Stadium Authority held another meeting about the A's ballpark search, and you can see the whole thing. I posted the whole meeting on YouTube already, so you can check that out if you want to. And as I record this on Tuesday, October 29th, we are still, awaiting any legit details about the financing plan from this whole thing. So they did, share some new renderings about the place. But we still don't really have any construction dates or, how they're going to pay for it, or, we heard they're still looking for lenders. So really, we don't really have much else except for kind of the laid out language of kind of like the bare bones of the draft development agreement again. So the hour-long meeting on the 17th, it features some interesting public comments, some cheerleading from Steve Hill, a brief kind of nothing burger from A's executive Sandy Dean, and again, kind of like a look at the toothless draft that we have of the development agreement right now. So perhaps the most interesting thing was the stuff that was omitted, because earlier that week, the A's and Valleys actually released like their preliminary master plan, and I put that in heavy air quotes because judging from comments from Steve Hill and Valley CEO Sue Kim, basically those plans didn't really mean anything at all. So I'll do another, I'll discuss that later on in another Ricky report. But it kind of laid out some really concrete renderings of how tall things are going to be, how tall the potential hotel towers could be, the 6 or 7 different layers. I believe these are the slides that we saw presented at the construction conference at Rio a couple months ago to the contractors that were there and stuff like that, the subcontractors. But so yeah, those have all been posted, but it was weird because after the meeting, so this is like after the meeting on that Thursday, that Thursday the 17th, the documents have been public for about 2 or 3 days by then, and you have to assume that Hill had access to them. But this is what he told Alan Snell of LV Sports Biz. Alan asked him if he had reviewed those preliminary master documents, and Hill's like, no.
Have you seen the site plan that was submitted to the county?
I haven't, no.
Okay. Since Sandy, the representative, mentioned that it had the hotel towers with the stadium on the site, would that have been helpful to show the public at the stadium board meeting?
Well, it's a preliminary design, so unnecessary to do that today. We'll certainly have that as an agenda item at some point.
So it's kind of weird. It's like you would think they would be hyping that up, but obviously they know that it's a nothing burger. It's like those other renderings from last year when you could tell the whole thing was just complete BS and took up way too much space, whatever. Again, they don't really have much of anything yet, it seems like. And likewise, it was also weird to hear from Bally's chairman Sue Kim. He told the Las Vegas Review-Journal, quote, "The renderings are not really renderings. They're more like a representation of how much space that we will have to work with here. I do think that the hotel's towers will be located where they were depicted, but what shape and what exact size they'll have, that depends on a lot of factors that have not been determined yet." So, they're touting it. It could be up to a 3,000 room hotel, but it could be as little as, I think, 1,500. Basically, their whole plan is up in the air. They got bigger fish to fry in Chicago. So, again, I'll talk about that more in depth later. But here we go on to the meeting. So, it started off with some public comments. And again, we heard from A's fan and lawyer Jeremy Koo. And Jeremy, I believe, has been at pretty much every public meeting throughout this process. And if you want to learn more about him, we had a great chat with him on episode 98 on the podcast about a month ago. So, go check it out. And throughout this whole process, Koo has brought up some concerns. He noted that he's still waiting to hear back from the proper authorities about a concern he raised a few months ago about, the Raiders owing about $17 million of property taxes they haven't paid in over 3 years. They owe they owe Nevada about $50 million unless they're exempt from this leasehold tax and Koo doesn't believe that they should be exempt from this leasehold tax, and he also wants it written into the language that the A shouldn't be exempt from it either. And he believes that this information should be presented to investors. If the A's are on the hook for another $15 million a year of payments, that investors should know about that. So that's his main aim. And he also brought up a new concern that the Bally's master plan, like how it was issued there, that perhaps it will, the Bally's towers could, obstruct the view from left field that they have out of that big window there. So here's a little bit from Jeremy.
With respect to item 11, what should be a draft deed, I'm concerned that to this point that there hasn't been any discussion about either the A's or this board reaching an agreement with GLPI to record a negative easement to protect the strip views out the big window that has been featured in the various drawings. If you compare the height levels of the Bally's master plan preview that was submitted to County Comprehensive Planning this week to the A's plans that were submitted at the same time, you can see that the meeting space and terrace area that will be visible out the left side of that window will exceed the main concourse height by about 18.5 feet. If you draw a line from the behind home plate view to the left side of the window, where the Bally's Phase 1 ballroom and terrace space will be, it seems like you lose the bottom half of the Statue of Liberty and a bit more to the right of that. And so I would encourage this board to think of what makes iconic ballparks iconic. That view out from home plate. Think PNC Park and the Pittsburgh skyline and the Roberto Clemente Bridge, Petco Park and the Western Metal Supply Warehouse and the San Diego skyline, Camden Yards and the B&O warehouse, and the list goes on and on. As a fan of an Oakland team whose own ballpark lost its spectacular view of the East Bay Hills and the more intimate bleachers of that era, when the LA Raiders returned to Oakland, I speak from personal experience. It turned that view out from home plate into an eyesore for the sake of additional seats that themselves did not have a very good view for both football and baseball. So I can tell you that these views will be important to the locals and to the tourists. They are as integral to the ballpark as the 9 acres that the ballpark sits on. And Cherry Hill indicated as such when he told the Senate in the special session that the stadium will have a view of the strip that cannot be beaten. In March, architect Bjarke Ingels said, "A giant window frames a majestic view of the life of the strip. All direct sunlight is blocked while all the soft daylight is allowed to wash the field in natural light." And the Nevada Independent paraphrases John Fisher saying in March, "Whatever Bally's decides to build will not be in front of the large window, blocking views of the strip." So to conclude, this board should ensure that by the time it takes over ownership of the land, that it can enforce this vision and these assurances going forward with a written recorded height limit on the property out that window. Thank you.
Jeremy, again, is super into this. I think he knows more about this than the actual Stadium Authority Board. And then after that, we heard some spicy comments from Alexander Marks of the Nevada State Education Association. Of course, NSCA is behind the 2 PACs that are trying to take down SB 1 through legal means. Schools Over Stadiums was behind the effort to try to get a referendum on the 2024 ballot. It didn't work out. They're still going to try to get it on there for 2026 if those county bonds are still in play. I believe like $120 million. And then he also, and then Strong Public Schools Nevada is also trying like the litigious path, like through lawyers and such. But recently, a district judge sided with the A's, saying that this deal hasn't gotten into place yet, so there's been no damage done. It's hard to prove anything's been done yet because no one's been harmed yet. So, but that's kind of waiting in the background. As Alex said here, but really it's just interesting. He's just basically ripping into Steve Hill to Steve Hill's face, and this is all like in a public forum, and they all have decorum and stuff. But it's just kind of interesting seeing Alex rip into him. Here's like the whole comment, and I just thought it was funny how Steve Hill at the end was like, "All right, thanks."
Afternoon.
Afternoon. Alexander Marks with Schools Over Stadiums. Well, after 16 months since the special session, it appears that public education is not the only thing suffering from a lack of public and financial investment. It's ironic, when public education receives additional funding, it comes with layers of accountability. Yet when billionaires get their hands on public money, they're met with cheerleaders and excuses, mainly from this chair and the Review Journal. Where is the accountability for this misguided project? You'll try and build this stadium on the backs of educators and the majority of our community who do oppose this stadium deal, but here's why it matters. Next legislative session, we'll need an additional $600 million to keep on the path for public education national average. We're hearing that amount's unlikely, which means that we'll then need a $1.5 billion investment in 2027. And if that number sounds familiar, that's the current estimated cost of this stadium. You are building a $1.5 billion stadium that costs the exact same amount as getting our public education to the national average. We know that this publicly financed stadium won't solve any of our financial woes because the first publicly financed stadium didn't solve our woes. That's why we show up to these meetings. We understand you've been provided a task by our misguided legislature, but that task does not include gaslighting our community. That task does not include cheerleading for an inept billionaire. That task does not include bending over backwards in the face of all economic data. There is a reason baseball doesn't have cheerleaders. Someone has to point out what an absolute waste of public resources this is, and we're happy to be those happy warriors and the one consistent organization pointing out the absolute failure of our elected officials and our appointed leaders when it comes to being good stewards of our public money. This chair, who was lobbying for this bill and now oversees the implementation somehow, proved our point best in his recent comments. It's clear the Fishers have the ability to provide the financing for the stadium, period. They just have it. Thank you for proving our point. If they have the money, why can't the billionaire pay for the stadium himself without relying on public funds? Why are we here when every economist and our educators are waiting in the cheap seats to tell you all we told you so? We're happy to be watchdogs on this issue. We understand that the court didn't rule on the constitutionality of our issue because they noted that the case wasn't ripe after 16 months and very little work having been accomplished to trigger any public funding. We'll be ready and wait when it does, because this is a fight worth having. Public money doesn't belong in these kinds of projects, and we'll continue to educate our community on this issue, which has led to the public overwhelmingly disapproving of this misguided project. Those numbers will continue to rise as demand for actual changes we face is demanded of you all. When we get this on the ballot, our citizens will finally have a voice. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so again, just really pointed attacks here, but, done, with decorum. I mean, in this settings, it's kind of interesting to see, two people who clearly probably hate each other interact. But anyways, that was Alexander Marks with the Nevada State Education Association. And then after that, they did some more clerical stuff, explaining that something called the draft deed. It was supposed to be presented, but I guess it's not done yet because A's, Bally's, and the landlord GLPI are still working on it. So that should be presented on Thursday in a quick little special session on Halloween. So, and then Hill also just went through some calendar stuff, saying that the Stadium Authority is going to move to quarterly meetings next year instead of monthly. Right now they've been trying to meet like once a month, but it sounds like they'll meet once every 3 months next year. And then we actually got some kind of interesting comments from Hill that actually. Just like the way he talks, it's like he's saying we will approve these, the draft, the development agreement on December 5th. It's not like we will consider it. He's saying we will approve it. So it's kind of like, as Chris Daly says later on, it's pretty much just like a rubber stamp committee is what it sounds like. Not much oversight, kind of just like a green light committee, They just want to pretend like they're going through the proper authorities, I guess. And then another thing, too, that Hill talks about here is that, and we mentioned on the most recent Ricky report, Alexander Marks talked about this in his public comments, is that Steve Hill and the Stadium Authority CFO, Ed Finger, I guess they have looked over financial information from third parties. We don't know who those third parties are. And they have the assurances that the Fishers have money. So, again, that hasn't been an issue. I believe the Fisher family was last valued at about $9 billion. And his brothers are worth about $3 billion each. Fisher's worth about $3 billion by himself. His mom's worth about $1.5 billion. So they have money in the bank, but what everybody's wanted to see is that the Fishers are willing to put it down. They haven't been willing to put it down the past 20 years, but perhaps, this situation is different. This is finally the time.
I talked a little bit about the financial capabilities of the A's. We were able to review quite a bit of information that was provided by third parties, largely, whether that was accounting firms or financial firms that backed the information on the Fishers balance sheets. We appreciate the opportunity to do that. Section 22 of the law that was passed in June of last year says that the board must select a developer partner of one or more persons who have, and this is number 3 of what we need to do. We've done 1 and 2 already, but number 3 is demonstrated to the satisfaction of the board that the developer partner is able to successfully develop and construct the Major League Baseball stadium project. And 4, provide to the board adequate financial security for the performance of the final financial obligations of a developer partner for the development. We will need to make those findings prior to approving the agreements that Mr. Finger is going to go through here today. So at the December 5th meeting, we will approve the lease, we will approve the development agreement, we will approve the non-relocation agreement. We will have a conversation and start a conversation with the board around the baseball stadium community oversight committee. And we will also talk about the financing of Allegiant Stadium. There will be a second requirement in order to allow the stadium authority to request bonding by the county that requires the team to set aside in the hands of third parties in irrevocable cash, letters of credit, or construction financing that provides all of the financing necessary to construct the stadium. So that'll be a second step that will happen sometime probably in 2025, but prior to issuance of bonds by the county.
After the meeting, again, Alan Snell of LV Sports Biz asked Hill if that that financial information about the Fishers will be made public. But Hill just kind of deflected it. He said, "Why won't we see that?" He's like, "Oh, because they're confidential." It was like, "Yeah, dude, but why is that confidential?" But I don't know. I guess it's the Fishers book, so we won't be seeing that anytime soon, I don't believe.
Will the Fishers show publicly to the stadium board validating the funds that they have to build the stadium?
It is each of the stadium authority board members will have the opportunity to review third-party information. This is the summary is coming from the Fishers, but the individual items are coming from auditors or statements from banks or other financial institutions, so that you can see that a third party has attested to that information.
Will those documents be made public?
They will not.
And why so?
They're confidential.
So thanks again to Alan Snell for relaying those comments from Steve Hill. Of course, there's not really any questions coming from the Stadium Authority Board. But I just want to reference, the language of SB 1 again. It says that the A's have to provide info to the board, but they don't have to make anything public. So they just have to provide info to the board that they are, financially capable of funding this thing. So I think in the board's eyes, the A's have done, satisfied the agreement, satisfied the language of SB 1 here, even though it doesn't say who's going to, how, the mechanisms, who's going to pay for what. It just says that the A's have the ability. So I think that the development agreement will be approved, and then we'll still be kind of waiting for the financial information maybe into spring. And we'll have to see if the Fishers have the balls to put down all the money, because I think last week it was the New York Post kind of rehashed a story from April from the LA Times that the A's are still seeking $500 million in outside investors from, they hired a firm to help them look for it. And here we are 6 months later, and they're still looking for it and still putting out public feelers like, hey, help us out. So it seems like we're still on square one here. And I guess the biggest thing is, I would assume for investors, is that the A's are still shopping the team at a $2 billion valuation, even though they're worth $1.2 billion. So no real room to recoup your investment. So then after that, we heard from A's executive Sandy Dean, who's been Fisher's longtime right-hand man, and he's the head of the stadium events company, kind of like the point man for this thing now. And he was the only person to really acknowledge that the A's and Valleys even created a master plan. But of course, there was no questions about it. So he just says, hey, we're doing this. Then there's nothing about it.
The news yesterday is a good opportunity for us to update people on what's been happening on the planning and entitlement process. And both the A's and Bally's and GLPI together submitted a preliminary entitlement information to the county on Monday afternoon. And that for our respective projects, the A's for the ballpark, Bally's GLPI for their planned casino resort. And that information came public yesterday afternoon, I think pretty much in totality. And the most significant piece of that information, I think, is the A's and Bally's and GLPI have come to an agreement on a master plan for the site that accommodates both the ballpark and a planned casino resort in a way that we each think is really good for our respective projects. The plans are preliminary, and this is our very first submission to the county. It was made on a preliminary basis, and will need extensive review by the county and also a number of other stakeholders, and that'll be a process that is now beginning. The county review process will provide for public meetings and also input, so there'll be an opportunity for dialogue. We're excited that the master plan has the ballpark in a location that has a good view of the Las Vegas Strip, and appreciate Mr. Koo talking about that. That's always been really important to us, is to try and make sure that the ballpark has a view out of some of what is the best of what people think of when they think of the Strip. It also has a significant Northwest Plaza for gathering outside of our outfield cable wire glass wall. And it also provides for meaningful on-site ballpark parking in the southeast corner of the parcel. We will be able to say more about the proposed plans once the county has had some opportunity to give input, and we can have that be reflected in our next submission, and this will probably be an iterative process. But the preliminary entitlement submission is an important step forward in the project, and we're really pleased to have made it and appreciate the partnership with Bally's and GLPI to help us get there as well. Thanks for the chance to give that update.
Yeah, thank you, Sandy. We appreciate it.
And again, notice how we said the words preliminary. I think that's just kind of lawyer speak or BS speak for this doesn't mean anything. So, and then after that, we heard from Ed Finger, again, the Stadium Authority CFO, kind of gave a lengthy explanation about the funding mechanisms here and how it's similar, how it's different to the setup that the Raiders have with their stadium here. So it's pretty convoluted and confusing stuff, to be honest. Again, I posted the whole video if you want to look at it, but here's just kind of a slide kind of looking at it. There's arrows going all over the place. Yeah, I don't know if they want this to be confusing on purpose, but I was like, okay, somebody's paying for this somehow. Hopefully taxpayers don't get screwed. But anyways, I did think it was interesting that he said, the Fishers or the A's will be on the hook for better than $1.25 billion or better than $1.25 billion. So here's that comment.
And that complicated picture is how a stadium gets built out of this flow of funds. Order of magnitude, by the way, while this focuses on private funds, there's better than $1.25 billion that comes from the team itself, the primary source of funding for the facility.
So I think it's worth noting right now, I believe, as far as we know, the $1.5 billion price tag still stands, but as Vitamin D was saying a few months ago, he was hearing it's going to be worth at least 1.8, and this kind of gives credence that maybe it might even be worth 1.9, because if you give the 1.25 from the Fishers that Finger's talking about, plus the 350 from public funds, that's 1.6, and then the 300 million from lenders that they seek, that's 1.9 billion. So maybe this thing will be costing around 1.9 billion, which is what Allegiant Stadium cost. And after that, Finger did some more boring clerical work about language changes in the development agreement. If you want to read the development agreement and stuff, the non-relocation agreement, I have linked those down in the description. Very scintillating stuff. And then, so that was pretty much it for the meeting. Really wasn't too much here. But to wrap it up, we did have some very interesting public comments. First, we heard from Koo again. He had a really poignant statement about Oakland losing a team and Vegas perhaps getting a team.
It's not strictly within the jurisdiction of the board, but it's really just a personal note. I don't begrudge Las Vegas obtaining a Major League Baseball team. Oakland and the East Bay lost a community institution, but that community remains. And I was among the 46,889 at the Oakland Coliseum a few weeks ago that cried at the last national anthem, the last ceremonial first pitch, the last seventh inning stretch, and all too soon the final out. I can't speak for all Oakland A's fans, but my hope is that this community, sometimes called a community of transients, embraces this historic and transient baseball team. I hope that you honor the histories of the communities that they left behind, Oakland, Kansas City, Philadelphia, by showing up as this city does for the Golden Knights and cheer on these Las Vegas A's. My doubts about Mr. Fisher's ability to treat this team as a civic institution does not interfere with my desire to see my neighbors experience the same joys and sorrows that I experienced as a fan of the 1990s and through this year's athletics. It's a heck of a ride, and I hope you all get your money's worth. Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome to come.
So shout out to Jeremy for that moment. I think it was like the most sane moment we had in this, an authentic moment that we've had in this whole process full of BS and stuff. And then after that, we heard from Nevada State Education Association Political Director Chris Daly. Again, he works with Marks on schools over stadiums and strong public schools in Nevada. And again, Daly had some very pointed comments, basically ripping the board to its face. And the whole process just kind of declaring it a sham as a whole. And again, the whole aim for this organization again is to recoup this public money to put it towards public schools, as I believe they're ranked 48th or 49th in public education, and they've been there for years.
Chair Hill, Chris Daly, Nevada State Education Association, and Schools Over Stadiums. First, Schools Over Stadiums has never been under the illusion that this board would take to heart the concerns of everyday people. We know you largely serve as a rubber stamp for the big resorts, gaming, development interests, and now the A's fine. Over much of the last year, we've been battling lawyers for John Fisher and this authority. While we've had a couple of setbacks in courts of law, we are overwhelmingly winning the battle in the court of public opinion. Everyday Nevadans not only share our priorities, they are also aware that John Fisher is the worst owner in sports. Simply put, the public is against this deal. I think that's probably why there's been a lot of posturing. It happens on that side of the dais. I think it happens on this side of the dais as well, over the viability of the A's stadium proposal and will it actually happen. Last week, Chair Hill mentioned that he peeked at the Fisher's books and found they're still billionaires. Not a point that we've ever debated. Don Fisher certainly made billions of dollars with the Gap. What is up for the debate is the character of his son. Will John Fisher balk on this Las Vegas deal like he's balked on many time and time again? Or has the cheapest owner in sports convinced his brothers to invest hundreds of millions of dollars of their own resources to make this deal happen? Before the beginning of this meeting, I thought we'd have an answer in December. But Chair Hill said that deposit of funds or binding letter of credit wouldn't be required before you sign a development agreement. It would only be required right before the issuance of bonds. That means we won't really know for sure. The public won't really know for sure if the Fishers are real and truly committed to putting their resources into this project until 2025 or even later. Speculation about this project's viability won't be answered this year. What we do know is Schools Over Stadiums is still here, and we will continue to question Nevada subsidizing a billionaire while not adequately funding schools for kids. And if the Fishers choose to spend their own money and move this project forward 2025 or 2026 or later, we will still be here. We will be fighting, taking it to the streets where we will win in the court of public opinion. Thank you.
And then finally, we heard from Evelyn Johnson, who founded from Nevada Women in Trades Union, and she just wants to make sure that women and minorities are represented in the trades, especially like the building trades, if and when this project goes down. So here's Evelyn.
My name is Evelyn Pacheco. I am an Army veteran. I am also a retiree of the Plumbers and Pipefitters Union. I am also the first Black woman to get a plumber's license in the state of Nevada in 2007. I am now the president of Nevada Women in Trades, where we successfully help women get careers in high-skilled blue-collar trades. We have a curriculum. We have graduated women into 5 different unions and also CDLs, also Culinary Academy, and that's what we're doing here. But my question is, and I have already emailed Mr. Fingers, my question is, for the workforce, what are going to be either the percentages or the hours for women, women of color, and veterans on this job? And I know today that's not what you talked about, but I would like for Nevada Women in Trades to be on the email list for when you do decide to talk about this and be at the table, because I think this is very important that we move the needle to make sure the underserved, underemployed women in this city can have a fair chance to make a fair living, to be able to buy a house, to be able to have a car, and to be able to take care of their kids.
So it is good to hear the public comments. I'm honestly kind of surprised there's not more people at this, but it's pretty much just been Schools Over Stadiums and Jeremy Q, and then we heard from Evelyn, but those are the only people really showing up for this. So sure, haven't really heard much people going rah-rah in support of this. So as far as we stand now here on October 29th, heading into Halloween, pretty much in wait-and-see mode. I think the biggest takeaway from this is that it sounds like Hill and Stadium Authority, they're just going to approve whatever the A's present to them on December 5th, and then they're going to figure out the financing in spring. So I guess we'll be seeing some updated documents at the end of November, like about a week before. They'll be posting them, so we'll be able to review them. But for now, we have like 7 weeks to look over these documents, which are pretty much just bones. I mean, if you look, like the names of the developers and stuff aren't there, the financing plan isn't there, and like construction dates and stuff isn't there. So some very key details aren't there, but as Finger and Dean and Hill will gladly say these documents are near completion. So I guess, honestly, I don't think we're going to know much until 2025. They put down that $100 million and construction really starts. Until then, I'll probably consider it in limbo. And then even then, I'll probably be skeptical until I see a shovel in the ground. But honestly, I think that point, that $100 million deposit up front will probably be the point of no return. Because John Fisher's not doing that without going through with it, I would think. You know, he's not one to throw away $100 million. Let alone like $100 million on a baseball player. Anyways. All right, I'm Alex Espinoza. Make sure to use code RickyBlog at lastdivebar.com. I'll have some more Ricky reports and news coming up soon, later this week, I hope. All right, take care. See you soon.